we have a show for you today. We have a man who Indiana knows, Dr. Woody Myers, who is running for governor of this great state. He's unbought, unbossed, and unafraid. He is about the people, not the party. He has shown that he can work with Democrat and Republican. We're going to dig into his head and ask him why he wants to run, where he wants to run, and where we can get to with him. So buckle up. We're getting ready to seek the butt naked truth.
This is not a test.
If you listen to this program, you're going to get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the butt naked truth. This program is X-rated.
You ready? You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
You are now tuned into the world's most honest talk show host, the Elder Moja.
Welcome. For those who don't know, this is Elder Moja Ajabu, your host for After the Naked Truth. This program is designed to strip the clothes off of well-dressed lies, and there are a bunch of well-dressed lies running around here. So I would suggest that if you have a problem with the truth, that you would sit yourself elsewhere, because we're going to be searching for the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the butt naked truth. You are listening to the most truthful talk show host in America. Unbought, unbossed, and unafraid. Today we are blessed with a man that wants to be the next governor of this great state of Indiana. And I want to show you his accomplishments. This man, he is well situated to be the governor. Dr. Woody Myers has served as Indiana State Health Commissioner, an attending physician at the Wishart Hospital Emergency Room, a teacher, an experienced business executive, and a nationally recognized leader in public health, focused on improving healthcare quality for working families. Woody made history when appointed by two governors, Republican Governor Robert Orr and then Democratic Governor Evan Bayh, as Indiana's youngest state health commissioner. While commissioner, Dr. Myers effectively led over 2,800 employees. So he shows that he can work across the aisle. During his tenure, Woody helped make Indiana a leader in AIDS education and gained national recognition when he fought to keep Ryan White, a teenage boy with AIDS, in school when his school district banned him from attending classes following his diagnosis. That shows he's compassionate. Over his career, Woody has served as the medical director for Indiana Blue Cross Blue Shield, now Anthem, Indiana's largest healthcare company, as chief healthcare officer for Ford Motor Company, where he worked with union officials to develop safety programs and high quality healthcare benefits, and as the chief medical officer for WellPoint Inc., which led the nation under Woody's leadership in measuring and improving the quality of healthcare for workers and their families. You can't get a better resume of executive experience than that. And plus, he shows that he can work with the working man, not only the guy that's running around in the suite, but the guy that's running around on the streets. Born in Indianapolis and raised in the Martindale Brightwood, Dr. Woody Myers is a proud third-generation Hoosier. He is a product of Indianapolis Public Schools and a graduate of Shortridge High School. I won't hold that against him since I graduated from Ben Davis. But we'll let him do that, all right. And Woody later received his Bachelor's of Science and his Master's in Business Administration from Stanford University and his MD from the Harvard Medical School. He is board certified in internal medicine and licensed to practice medicine in Indiana. Woody is married, lives in Indianapolis, and has 5 children, 1 son-in-law, 1 daughter-in-law, and 2 grandchildren so far.
That's right, so far.
Welcome.
Thank you,
Welcome. It
Elder
is a
Abaji.
pleasure. Ajabu.
Ajabu, excuse me, it's good
No
to be
problem.
here. It's good to be here.
It is good to have you, and we want to give the opportunity to the listening audience for you to share why you want to run for governor of Indiana.
Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity, and I'm at a stage of my campaign where I am working very hard to get the word out and make friends and understand the issues, and I appreciate the chance to do so on your show. I have been a public servant, and I have been in the private sector. I've been around. I've done a lot of different things, and
Yes.
one of the things I have learned is that what makes the most difference is good leadership. Whether you are running a company, or whether you're running a hospital, or whether you're running a medical practice, or whatever you're doing, you got to have good leadership. You've got to make good decisions, and if you do that, then you'll spend the resources effectively, and you'll get the outcomes that you want. And what I've seen in my career for so many years is that we just don't do that well enough in government, and government is really responsible, Elder, for all of the common denominator activities that affect everyone. And I decided that we have so many big issues that have been unaddressed in our state that I could do one of 2 things. I could become an angry old man and start throwing things at the TV and keep writing op-ed editorials, or I could get off my you-know-what and do something about it. And I decided that throwing my hat back into the political ring was the right step for me to take at this stage of my life, at this stage of my career, because I know we could do a better job. I know if we hire the right people to run the agencies, we could spend the state's tax dollars far pushing them aside. We can do the right thing instead of rewarding our friends with contracts. We can get contracts in the state that actually produce results. I just know that if we reoccupy the State House, both at the governor's level and at the legislative level, we can make a huge difference for citizens of the state, all citizens, in a positive direction. And lastly, I think that we can do much more in our presence nationwide by inspiring our leadership in Washington, the Hoosier component of that leadership, to push our federal government to give us our fair share of resources here in Indiana, and to push the federal government on those problems that affect us that are better solved at the federal level. So it's leadership, and I know I bring that to the table, and I think it's time for a change. The Republican administration has been, and Republicans have been in charge of the administration now since 2005, and that's just too long. I think they've gotten many of our Republican friends a little full of themselves. They've made some decisions that are very bad for our state. It's time for a change, and I'm the guy I think that can deliver that change.
Well, you got me convinced. But this is, I'm talking about that change, and I'm talking about fair access. And as you know, there's a push, especially here in Indianapolis and across the nation, for politicians to have a black agenda. An agenda that is directed directly toward people of African descent who has not got our fair share in this country. There is a law in Indiana, and the law says that a certain amount of business by the state must be done with businesses owned by people of African descent. Right now, the governor, and they set these goals every 5 years, the governor has set a goal about 7% across the board for the state government to do business. One if you become governor, would you try to increase that? And two, would you meet that?
I think first you have to understand all the specifics, and that's one of the things that you do before you start any initiative. So yes, we have a goal, and I do not believe it's being met in any major area of our state. And I do know that it's, again, leadership that makes the difference. So each component of the state budget has a different solution. You don't do the same thing in the highway programs as you do in the health programs, as you do in social services, et cetera. So I think it will take a really detailed assessment of what have we done successfully, who are the vendors, who are the suppliers, who are the which companies are doing well with the state, and how do we increase their participation if they're providing the services in the appropriate way at the appropriate cost. I think the state also has a responsibility to work with small businesses that want to be participants who are not yet participants, to make sure that they understand how to become eligible so that they can offer their services to the state, so that we can increase the number and the quality of participation. And in addition to that, I think the state has a responsibility to help the young entrepreneurs who want to go into business to understand what components of that business are required to be a part of the state's programs. And of course, in each area, the programs are somewhat different. So the state has a responsibility to develop small businesses, especially those that can help meet these goals. The state has a responsibility to look at the businesses that are already helping us and to see what we can do to increase their participation. And the state has a responsibility to hold its agency heads responsible. If one agency head is achieving the target and is doing better than others, then we need to find out what it is that she or he did and spread the word. And if another agency head is nowhere close to his or her target, we need to understand why. And if it's a problem with their education, we can fix that. If it's a problem with their attitude, then that's a different issue. Right? And so I think that each component requires a diagnosis. And the way I've said it to many in our campaign, I've spent my life doing diagnostic activity as a physician. I've diagnosed many complex patient care issues, and I've diagnosed many complex issues surrounding our participation in government, private sector, public sector. So diagnosing and treating complex problems is what I do. And so this is a complex problem that would require deep level of diagnosis and an attitude that's different than what we have today. I think you have to tell the public this is important. You have to tell the public why it's important, and then you have to set up the steps required to meet the goal.
So I'm taking from that the first part of you to address that deficiency is to educate people that there is a deficiency and why, and diagnose the why, so that you're speaking informed and not off the hip. I want to deal with that attitude, because it's a two-pronged problem here, and I appreciate you bringing out both. There's a government problem, but that attitude, sometimes us as a people are looking for something and not ready to get that something that we're looking for, because we haven't properly organized ourselves or properly situated ourselves or properly educated ourselves so that we can take advantage of it. So in addressing that attitude, and I heard you in your remarks, initiating programs such as, I got a call from a plumber today, and he was asking me, how does he become certified? And the city has a certification program to where it's that they help you to get the paperwork out of the way.
The MBE, WBE status.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Would you do the same thing on the state level?
Well, I think, again, it requires the cities treat this set of challenges differently than the state, and the state treats it differently than the federal government. So I think you have to understand the specifics and what the cities are requiring, and depends on which city, versus what the state versus what the feds are requiring. I do believe, though, that there's some common elements. You have to be a good business person, providing a service that's required and providing it at a high quality level. You got to know what you're doing.
By all means.
Because the state has to get its money's worth.
That's right.
These are hard-earned tax dollars
That's right.
that people are spending on services for everyone. And you got to make sure that you have a system in place that monitors the expenditure, monitors the product or the service, and make sure that all that's supposed to be delivered is being delivered at the right cost at the right time. So that requires you put in place an infrastructure, people who care, and people who are responsible, and people who are doggedly following the rules. And very importantly, if the rules that we have today are obstructions as opposed to enablers, we have to fix that.
My man.
Because I do not know the last time the rules, all the participation rules, all the requirements were reviewed in detail, and whether or not we got sufficient input from, as a state government, from those with whom we were dealing, to find out, are the requirements appropriate, too harsh, too lenient? Let's understand what, if any, tune-up or change is needed to the rules as well.
They're supposed to be doing a study to give them all that information, and I looked on the website and I was not able to find any information, and they're telling me that it's forthcoming.
Okay.
But as you stated earlier, I don't know that they have ever met their goals. Would you be open to looking at, instead of it being a goal, to make it a set aside, to put pressure on the government to make sure that it finds the people and educates the people and develops the people so that they can meet their goals?
You know, I would treat this like I treat other complicated problems. I know that there is no one simple answer. I know that you have to understand the details. It's like a patient walks into my office and says, my abdomen hurts. You don't, as a first step, immediately take out your scalpel and operate.
And we'll say, let's take that stomach.
Well, you don't do it that way.
Let's just go and take that out of there. If that's what's hurting, let's get rid of that.
Well, that might be your medical practice. That's not mine.
No. I would not do it. I would defer to you.
Well, I would, that if you're deferring to me,
yes, sir.
I would do a history.
Okay.
I would do a physical examination.
Okay.
I would decide what laboratory tests are needed. I would decide whether you need an MRI, a CT, or any scans. And then after assembling all the information, I would propose that there is a differential diagnosis of A, B, C, and D. Let's figure out which one it is. And then once that determination has been made, let's treat it such that the problem is either improved or eliminated. And that's the same way you go at problems like this. You can't just make an assumption that it's X when it could be Y or Z. And so I can't sit here and say to you today that the goals are too high or too low, they can or can't be met, and whether there is another process, such as a set-aside, that would be a better approach. It really requires far more intense evaluation before I could make that kind of a recommendation.
I really appreciate your honesty and your, and I can see your wheels working to say that I have to understand the problem before I can solve the problem.
That's correct.
And I think they call that the scientific method. Because I actually have a degree in electrical engineering, and we do the same thing. You know, we call it troubleshooting, whereas that y'all call it diagnosis. But as a doctor, and I'm getting ready to switch gears on you, and I really appreciate your answers on the business end of things. Social justice is running big here in the country. People are very concerned with how police are interacting, or the justice system is interacting with all people, and specifically people of African descent.
Yes.
As a doctor, you took an oath to do nobody harm, a Hippocratic oath.
That's correct, I did.
And when I look at putting people in cages, would you say that that would be harming someone?
Well, I think built into your question are some charged words, and I'm going to be honest with you. And one of those words is cages. And bars, when they surround you completely, at all times, could be classified obviously as cages. And there are times when it is a requirement for certain people to be separated from society. And there are many ways to do that, many places in which that's done. We have a whole process called the justice system that manages and oversees how that happens. There are a lot of issues and problems. It's certainly not perfect, but it's designed for a reason, because there are a number of people who do not follow society's rules, and as a result, there needs to be a separation from them and everyone else. Now, once that the legal system has made the determination that that separation will be of a specific period of time, i.e. a sentencing of a week, a month, a year, 20 years, or whatever, then there are various places that the state and the counties have set aside for that to occur. If it's under a year, typically it's in a jail. Frequently it is. If it's over a year, frequently it's in a prison. And I have a great deal of experience with both jails and prisons. Let me tell you what that experience is. When I was an emergency room physician at Indiana University School of Medicine, working at the Wishart Hospital, now Eskenazi, when I was on call, when I was on duty, there was a separate jail ward for prisoners who are folks that had been arrested, not always prisoners, who had a medical emergency or a medical problem that needed to be assessed and treated. It was, of course, locked, it was guarded, etc. And we saw some of the same things there that we saw outside, the flu, etc., that's influenza as an example, but then we saw other things that you typically don't see as often. And we had to be aware of where the circumstances of what the conditions were for that individual, whether or not there might have been an altercation, who was involved in that altercation, whether there might have been a sexual assault, who was involved. All of those things played into how we managed those patients. So that was my first experience in set up them. And I saw a lot of things. I saw a lot of very difficult and terrible problems, things that had been done to people and by people to others. But more importantly, over the time that I was health commissioner, especially when I was in New York City as health commissioner, I oversaw the healthcare at Rikers Island.
Oh, Lord.
Rikers Island is one of the largest urban prisons in America. And it's a complex that's sort of sits in the river all the way to LaGuardia Airport. And it has some of the most difficult circumstances, the most difficult individuals with mental health issues, sociopathic, everything you could possibly think of that's at Rikers Island. And my job was to make sure that the medical care that was being provided was appropriate. Now, the 8th Amendment of the Constitution says that you have a responsibility, that we have translated that into saying that jailed individuals and imprisoned individuals have medical rights. Just because you are in jail or in prison doesn't mean that you don't get treated for healthcare issues. I was responsible as the lead physician on making the determination with the colleagues that I had what that treatment should be. So that's another way that I've had experience. And then the third major way I've had experience with jails and prisons is that I was the CEO of a company that provided healthcare services to correctional institutions across the United States, one of the largest companies of its kind. And we did not do guards or services, we just did healthcare. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, providing medication, providing the okay or the authorization for surgery, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we did, that's what I oversaw. And in doing that, I had an opportunity to see jails and prisons throughout this country. And it was in many respects terrible, yet at the same time it was wonderful. Now, what could I possibly mean by that?
Yeah, unwrap that.
I will do just that. Let me start with the wonderful. Why would that be? For many men and women, especially young men and women and older men and women in our system, or in prison or in jail, it's the first time for many of them to actually have comprehensive health care.
That's
And
wonderful.
people don't understand
Yeah,
that.
that's
Once you
wonderful.
are in jail or prison,
I
the
hear you.
state or the county or the entity is
I hear
responsible
you.
for your
Yeah,
health care.
I hear you.
And so we would get somebody that had a undiagnosed problem like a cancer or even a hernia. Some were complicated, some were very serious, and some weren't. But it would be the first time that they had access
Good
to a
point.
physician,
Good point.
nurses, diagnostic information, and then treatment. And when we would find these
Treatment.
problems, we would treat them.
Yes,
That would
sir.
be the requirement. And I can't tell you the number of families that were grateful that we found
I guess
X
they were.
in patient Y because they thought something might be wrong, but they didn't have the money, or they didn't have the insurance, or they didn't have the means, or the access to the healthcare system. And it's terrible that they had to wait until they got into jail or prison to find out, but they did. Now, let me complicate the story just a little bit further.
Yeah, that's.
Let me go.
It's
let me
bad
go.
that you had to go to prison to get help.
Well, let me
but
tell
then
you.
as governor, you can address that.
Let me tell you that when I was at Rikers Island,
Okay.
people told me that what happens around Christmas time was that the pregnant women will shoplift. And I said, why will pregnant women shoplift?
So they can get the free health
So they can get the free, and especially when it's cold outside. When you got to Rikers Island and had your baby there, you got to spend time with your baby. You got diapers, you got milk, you got formula, etc. There were good people to help you, and it was a shame these women were imprisoned and chose to commit a crime in order to get the care that they wanted because other women had told them that this was going on.
This is what you can do.
When I was CEO of the company, we learned of individuals with hepatitis C, which is a chronic disease for which there is a cure
Oh, is that
available today. Yes.
That's recent.
Now, cure is 97 to 98% effective. Now, that's pretty darn good. It doesn't work on 100% of patients. But we heard of individuals who were committing crimes in order to get into prison, in order to get this life-saving care. Why? Because the care costs, retail, it costs more than $50 and often up to $100,000 just for the medication, not counting the doctor, not counting all the other things. So we have a healthcare system in this country that works well for many, but is broken for many as well. And I saw that every single day when I ran the company that provided this care in prisons and jails, especially on mental health issues. We have turned our jails and prisons into de facto mental health hospitals. There are so many people who would have done much better had they received the mental health services that they needed when they were first presented with their problem, as opposed to what they were getting in jail or prison after they committed a crime that had been associated with that illness. So many people make so many bad decisions that are against the law when they are suffering from untreated or undertreated mental illness. What does that mean for the state? It means that we are absolutely required, we should be absolutely required to provide more nurses, more physicians who are interested in taking care of mental health issues, and more facilities, because we have a deficit in the state, and that is part and parcel with part of the opioid epidemic that we have in Indiana and across this nation. Not enough folks to provide the behavioral health services that are required to help people understand how to get off of the poisons that they are taking. So it's a long-winded answer to a very important question.
Very good answer.
And we have got to do a better job.
Now that's the good part.
Indiana is one of the states that clearly must change its policies with respect to the care that we provide in jails and in prisons, especially for those who have mental health issues. And if the voters of this state elect me governor, that will be an absolute priority.
You dealt with the good part of having what you saw in jail. What's the bad part?
There are many bad parts. There are many jails. Jails are controlled, of course, by counties, and the service levels for health care vary depending on which county you are in. Some counties have...
Even though they come up under the umbrella of the state.
Well, everything comes up under the umbrella of the state or federal government ultimately. But the expenditures and the decisions are first made for jails primarily by the counties. And in some counties you have physicians and nurses that are provided by outside companies. Some counties have their own. Every county does it somewhat differently. I think the state could help better organize that care, and very importantly, provide standards that can be used that will provide a sort of an approach that could be similar between counties so that there are not as many discrepancies, especially between the small counties that can't afford to do the same thing that Marion County or Lake County or Monroe County can do. Then the state has responsibility after you have been convicted of a crime and you are given a sentence. The state has the responsibility for taking over your care. And the state of Indiana has decided years and years ago to contract that out to a private company to make sure that that care is being provided in a cost-effective way by folks who do this every day. It's really hard for government to manage healthcare services. That's not government's strongest suit. And so what they have, most governments
But you could
have
bring
found-
that to the party with
Well,
your experience.
I could certainly, I believe, do a better job, and I can certainly improve what we've got today.
Sure.
But there are a lot of reasons why it does make sense in many circumstances to let outside companies provide services to the state. You know, just an example, the state of Indiana is not the best provider of asphalt or of concrete or fixing streets,
Right.
and so we get companies to help us with this. Well, you know, that's part of it. That's
Right,
part of
right,
it. It's
right.
the same thing for other services as well, like healthcare.
Sure.
But the bottom line is that I know we can do a better job. I know that there are gaps that need to be filled. And one of them I mentioned is hepatitis C. We do not have a uniform policy in the state prison system of when and how we are providing the treatment for hepatitis C. I would bring that to the system, but it's going to also require that we get a legislature that will want to do the right thing. It's sad. It's very sad that if you are a state employee, it's good, excuse me, if you're a state employee and you get hepatitis C, you get appropriate treatment.
Right.
That would include, heaven forbid, if the governor got hepatitis C, he would get good treatment. He would get the right drug, right dose, right time.
And not have to pay the $50,000.
Well, he wouldn't have to pay. He might have to pay a copay depending on which plan he has.
Right.
But you wouldn't have to pay the whole 50 to 100 grand, right? If you are a prisoner in the state of Indiana, you don't have that same access to that drug, even though it's the state's responsibility. If you are in the Medicaid program in the state of Indiana, we haven't yet set up the system so that all Medicaid patients in the state who have hepatitis C are getting the right treatment. So those are both areas that I know I could bring leadership to that we can fix. And that's, I think, part and parcel of what we got to do to help improve our correctional system.
We're fast approaching the end of the program.
We just got started.
Yeah, and I wish we could go longer because you're a man with a very wealth of knowledge, and we need the state to draw on that knowledge so that we can be more compassionate to one another. So I would like to give you an opportunity to tell our audience in your closing remarks why they should support you for governor.
You know, I have done a lot of things in my career. I'm very fortunate. I can't complain. And I grew up in 46218. Now people in Indianapolis know that 46218
That's the worst
has a lot of issues that we should be working on collectively, but that's where I grew up. I went to School 56. I went to Shortridge. I went to.
I won't hold that again.
I am a product. I made it through IPS. I decided that I was actually going to do what the teachers said, and I was going to study, and I was going to learn something, and I was going to bring those skills
Right attitude.
back. And I know today that there are kids just like me at that time in 46218, in 46204,
That's right.
all around the state, who, if given the right opportunity, we could do so much of a better job for our school system, which we didn't get a chance to talk about.
Right.
It is nowhere near where it needs to be in terms of its ability to make sure that every child has the opportunity to reach his or her fullest potential. We have a system of funding education in this state that rewards the rich and punishes the poor.
Tell it.
We have a system that for IPS is getting less money, and other schools that don't need it are getting more
money. Tell me.
And that formula has to be changed.
That's
As
true.
governor, that's what I would champion, changing that formula so that all kids had access to, for instance, computer technology. There are some school districts that I think are just wonderful in Indiana that give their kids the MacBook computer. Now you
Right.
can argue which one you should get, but
Right.
it has everything they need. All their textbooks are downloaded in it. They take it home every night. We have schools that are really doing well with the technology and have teachers that understand how to use it. Other school districts, including Indianapolis, don't.
Right.
And in 2019, 2020, a school district that's not using the internet, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
it's
you're behind.
it's way too
Yeah,
far
yeah, you're
behind.
behind.
You've got to change. It is way past time. And so we've got to have a school system leadership of the school systems in our state and a state legislature that want to invest
That's right.
in the changes that are required. And that's the kind of thing that if I'm elected governor, I will champion. Healthcare changes, educational changes, absolutely positively bringing new tech-related jobs, but keeping the old manufacturing jobs as well. Best customer is the one you already have.
I
If
swear.
you've already got 6,800 GM employees, 11,000 Eli Lilly employees, you want to know what to do to get to 7,800 or 12,000. You keep those jobs, you keep those companies happy, but you bring the new ones in. So I would work hard every day on those and so many other areas, environment, climate change, et cetera. If
We
the
need
governors
more
of the
time.
state, if the voters of the state gave me that chance.
Yes, sir. We need more time. But I want to thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
I want to thank you for listening. And you've been listening to Elder Umoja Ajabu, your host for After Naked Truth, the most truthful talk show host in the business. Unbought, unbossed, and unafraid of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the butt naked truth. You know I don't have but one question for you. You ready?
This is not a test.
If you listen to this program, you're gonna get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the butt-naked truth. This program is X-rated.
You ready? You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
You are now tuned into the world's most honest talk show host, the Elder Moja Ajabu.